This sofa is giving me like severe Sherlock Holmes kind of vibes. Hi, so welcome back to my channel. This video is going to be essentially kind of like a video essay on all of the Agatha Christie books that I have read so far. I'm going to categorize them by kind of detective and then her other work, which is kind of more like standalones. So we're going to start with Poirot, and then there will be subcategories. So short stories that I've read, and then another subcategory, full-length novels. And then the other category that I'm going to do is essentially her standalones and other works. Some of them do have like recurring detectives, but I've only like read one of them. So that will be the other category. And so far I haven't read any Marple. It's going to be a long old video. I have about 8 pages worth of notes. So grab yourself a cup of coffee, grab yourself a cup of tea, get comfortable. I need you to know that I have named this document with all of my notes Queen of Crime, my personal hit list. It hits the spot. No? Does that not sound good? I guarantee that probably like 80 to 90% of the people watching this video know who Agatha Christie is, but the A-star student in me feels like I need to do things correctly. And so I need to give like a little introduction to the author. This is Wikipedia. That's my source. I can hear Henry Cavill in my head going, Wikipedia?
This isn't Wikipedia.
Yeah. Wikipedia? Using Wikipedia as your source of information?
Dame Agatha Mary Clarissa Christie, that's right, I did my homework, was born September 1890 and died 12th of January 1976. She was an English writer known for her 66 detective novels and 14 short story collections, particularly those revolving around fictional detectives Hercule Poirot and Marple. She also wrote the world's longest running play, The Murder Mystery, The Mousetrap, and she also wrote 6 novels under the pseudonym Mary Westmacott. Agatha Christie's works total to 130 publications. My goal is to read every single one of them someday. I'm not there yet, otherwise this video would be far too long. This includes 74 novels, 66 of which were detective novels, 28 collections of short stories with a total of 164 short stories. It boggles my mind. 3 poems, 16 stage plays, 7 plays for BBC and TV radio, and also 2 autobiographies. So she did not hang around. Wow. In no particular order, we're going to start with Poirot, short stories, short but sweet. I've written down the synopsis for every single book. Not my words, I took them from Goodreads. However, I have given a synopsis for every single book, followed by my own personal commentary and thoughts and opinions. First book is Murder in the Mews. A young woman appears to have committed suicide while her roommate was away for the weekend. When the roommate returned, she found the upsetting scene and called the police. However, the lead inspector, our friend Jack, was sufficiently doubtful about the cause of death that he called in the help of Hercule Poirot. Where will the inconsistencies lead? This one is a very lovely autumnal book to start with because it takes place on Guy Fawkes night. So it's a very cozy read, obviously extremely short. It's perfect if you just want a cozy slice of a murder mystery that you can just read in one sitting on an evening. Thing with short stories, and I feel like it's the reason why a lot of people don't really tend to go for them, is that they can often feel rushed and they can feel half-baked. Of course though, the Queen of Crime does it wonderfully, and she makes sure to give it enough room to develop in a significant way. She keeps the plot tightly wound, a small cast of characters, and she doesn't get bogged down in like the details. Because of her ability to write characters in just a few short sentences, and so you really get a feel for the character without her having to go on and describe him for pages and pages. She does it wonderfully, and as I say, it's just a really nice thing to have, and to be able to just read a full story from A to Z in just one evening. Second one is The Incredible Theft. The fate of a nation rests on a lie and a spy. Can Poirot see through the swirl of outrageous deception, lust and arrogance? Would it be better if he didn't? So much for his quiet night in the country to attend a small dinner party with the First Minister of Armaments. I swear I've read through all of these before. I'm just an idiot. Something of national security importance has been stolen and Poirot's on the spot. I mean, he's always on the spot. When is Poirot not on the spot? I would probably avoid Poirot if I did come across his path. I'd kind of be like, oh god. This one wasn't one of my favorites. I think I gave it 3 stars. It was quite unique in the sense that this one doesn't actually have a murder, but it was still really fun to follow Poirot's process of elimination and see how he gets to the solution. Next one is the disappearance of Mr. Davenheim. Mr. Davenheim, a wealthy financier, leaves his home to mail a letter at the bottom of the block, then fails to return. The story fills the newspapers and intrigues Hercule Poirot, who challenges Inspector Japp with the claim that he can solve the case before the police and without leaving his flat. I listened to this one as an audiobook, and so it was a really nice little diversion to have on whilst I was eating my breakfast and making my coffee. And I think I read this one after I had finished another Agatha Christie, and it was like a full-length one, and I just finished it and I had about half an hour left of cleaning. So I put this one on and it was perfect for that. It's not a standout, but what I really loved was seeing the friendship between Chief Inspector Japp, Hercule Poirot and Hastings.
Well, I hope it's not too much of an ordeal, old chap. When I had mine out, it was absolute hell. For a week afterwards, I got this stabbing pain all down my right-hand side.
Hastings. I think the Chief Inspector would like now the little rest.
Huh.
They make such a fantastic trio, and as I mentioned in this one, Hercule Poirot doesn't even leave his flat to figure out the case. It's a very like wholesome one because there's some like friendly wagering, some like nonsensical clues, some questions from Poirot that make him seem absolutely batty, but then in the end there's a really lovely, neat, clever explanation for it all. So yeah, I would highly recommend this one. Again, if you're doing like some cleaning or you've got like a task that's going to take you not more than 40 minutes. After that I read Dead Man's Mirror. It had a very eccentric feel to it. I think it's because the characters in this one were particularly eccentric and were like very spiritual. Hercule Poirot is requested to visit a client as quickly as possible, indeed on a specific train, but by the time he arrives, the gentleman is dead. I mean, of course he is. A smashed mirror convinces Poirot that the apparent suicide of his client is far too convenient an explanation for what is obviously a gruesome case of murder. This is a locked room mystery with an interesting cast of characters, and once again, it's one that keeps you guessing until the end. This one, as I say, wasn't my favorite because I think the problem with this one is I had seen the episode. I mean, I've seen all of the Hercule Poirot episodes, but this one I like actually remembered it, whereas some of the other ones I can't remember them. So I A, knew who the murderer was, and B, I remember that that particular episode it felt like a fever dream. It really influenced this book for me, and so I wasn't as into it as some of the other ones. Triangle at Rhodes. The story concerns a lonely wife, the use of poison, and a husband attracted to a lady on holiday in the Greek islands with her 5th husband. It just so happens that Hercule Poirot is on holiday on the island of Rhodes at the same time to watch it happening. Will his warning prevent a tragedy? So this is one of Christie's most famous short stories. It has a great title, super memorable. It had a great twist, it was superbly paced, and it's once again just tied up in a really nice little neat bow at the end. And it is one of her most famous ones, and you can see why, because it's like super atmospheric. You're in Greece. I was supposed to be going to Greece, so it would have been perfect for then, but I didn't end up going. I did, however, read it when it was like super sunny out, and it felt perfect. I could see myself there. It was like I was on the beach next to Poirot, watching it all happen with him and going The Girl in the Train, not to be confused with The Girl on the Train or any other titles that are very, very similar. This one is about George Rowland. Roland? I'm gonna say Roland. That sounds better than Rowland. It's George Rowland. Wait, no, I said I wanted to say Roland. George Rowland, a bored playboy, disowned for the 7th time by his wealthy uncle. When a beautiful girl bursts into his compartment, frantically begging to be hidden, his life changes drastically. I didn't enjoy this one as much. The audiobook is like 39 minutes long, so it is incredibly short, and it was narrated by Hugh Fraser, who I absolutely adore. I love him so much and his voice just brings me joy. So I love him. However, I just thought that this one was really unmemorable and it was particularly kind of insane, a little bit too preposterous. I also didn't warm to any of the characters on this one. It's just not one of her best. I wouldn't recommend it. If you are an Agatha Christie fan, then why not? But if you're like trying to get into her books, I definitely wouldn't recommend starting with this one because it's not something that is typically her kind of writing. The Affair at Victory Ball. Young Lord Cronshaw is murdered at a masked ball. His fiancée dies of a cocaine overdose. And his fiancée dies of a cocaine overdose later that same evening.
Good Lord.
Who was wearing which costume? Can Poirot find out who the killer is? Fun fact, this was the first Agatha Christie short story to be published. It's short but sweet. This one is narrated by David Suchet. So if you don't know, David Suchet plays Poirot in the series and Hugh Fraser plays Hastings in the series. Both of them have narrated most of the Agatha Christie books and their audiobooks are so good. I would 100% recommend them. And I thought that particularly for this one, I think that the audiobook is the better option because David Suchet just brings so much more tension and excitement to the book. So I would like recommend it 1,000,000%. In my humble opinion, this wasn't her most ingenious plot, but it was still a fun one. It's a great option. Once again, I keep repeating myself, but it's a great option for if you're going on a little walk or if you're just doing a little bit of tidying, maybe getting ready in the morning. I think that this is a nice one to have on in the background because again, it is very short. It was a slightly more fun one in the sense that Poirot actually kind of lays out the clues. Usually he is like quite excited to like keep some things back so that he can really do like a big reveal at the end. That wasn't so much the case in this one. He kind of does lay out the clues, which means that you as the reader are a little bit better able to kind of try and piece them together yourself and have a guess at who the murderer was. So another fun one. Apparently we finished the short stories. I thought that there were more. There aren't. So we're going to move on to novels now. So the first one is Halloween Party, which I thought would be a good one to kind of get out of the way because I have already mentioned how much I don't like this one. Why is this giving... I look like Alexis Rose from Schitt's Creek.
David, how long are you gonna be doing this?
David? No, David. Honestly, David, it's like a witch's house in here, David. Ouch, David. Ouch, David.
Oh my god, ew, David!
David!
What?
Yeah, so I didn't like this one. This was by far my most disappointing Agatha Christie that I've ever read. And it happened to be the second book that I ever read by her. And it's why it took me a while to kind of become a fan and read more because I read this one and I was extremely disappointed. So, a teenage girl witness is drowned in a tub of apples. At a Halloween party, Joyce, a hostile 13-year-old, boasts that she once witnessed a murder. When no one believes her, she storms off home, but within hours, her body is found still in the house, drowned in an apple-bobbing tub. Doesn't that sound so good? I really love the macabre and Christie certainly isn't scared to go there. She kills off 2 of her characters who are children. It's definitely dark and it features one of my most favourite recurring characters, Ariadne Oliver. It's also perfect because it's like, of course this book is going to involve her and her apple. She's like an apple fiend, so of course she was perfect for this one. And then that being said, I really can't think of a single redeeming quality for this book and I would heavily recommend that you skip it if you want to read some of her books. If you're already an Agatha Christie fan and you're kind of like on a mission to read everything that she's ever published, then obviously you can give this one a go, but I don't think that it's a good one to try out her writing. For the reasons I didn't like this book, number 1, it's incredibly slow and boring. Number 2, not a single character has a distinct voice. You might think when reading this that Agatha Christie wrote extremely cardboard characters. In this one, you really have to sit through Poirot interviewing all of these different characters, and the exact same questions are repeated. Everybody gives the same theories. Essentially, all of the discussions are exactly the same, with maybe like one slight detail tweaked, but it's just a repeat of the same conversation over and over and over again. And it felt empty of like any excitement. It was really tedious, repetitive. It felt really bland. It was empty of character. There was no drama. It was predictable. Ariadne, who I was super excited to see in this book, she becomes like a kind of a parody of herself. And then on top of that, I've already talked about it, so I won't go into detail, but this book made me extremely uncomfortable in the way that it described this 13-year-old girl. The murder victim is, as I say, a 13-year-old girl, and I quote, there is a question from Poirot at one point where he asks one of the suspects, he says, was this young girl sexy? And it wasn't like a one-off. It was done multiple times, and multiple characters kind of talking about this teenager, barely, as if she were a woman. And even if she were a woman, it was uncomfortable. However, I am very aware the publication date for this book was 1969, so it kind of leads me to believe that maybe one of my favourite mystery authors was simply just tired of writing this character. She was maybe writing to meet a deadline. And also it is one of her later works, so maybe she'd kind of just used up all of her like suspenseful endings and gripping characterizations. Granted, one of her like most respected works, Curtain, that was still to come, but maybe this was like one of the reasons for why she was kind of ready to give Poirot his send-off. I have 3 batteries for this camera and all of my batteries are dead, much like my social life. So, the ABC murders. There's a serial killer on the loose, working his way through the alphabet, and the whole country is in a state of panic. But leaving a trail of deliberate clues to taunt the proud Hercule Poirot might just prove to be the first and fatal mistake. When I was looking for the synopsis for this one on Goodreads, I saw someone in the reviews saying that this book was basically like an episode of Criminal Minds, but with a fussy Belgian sporting weird mustaches running around in tight leather shoes after a serial killer, and I just thought that that was like such a funny way of summarizing it, because like, imagine someone who has never ever read this book and knows nothing about it and knows nothing about Agatha Christie, and then you explain the book with just that one sentence to them. Not my favourite. I loved hearing Hugh Fraser, again I listened to it as an audiobook, and I loved hearing Hugh Fraser actually play Hastings, like play himself. I really loved that. That brought me so much joy, and it just made me like go back to being a kid and reminded me of when I used to watch it when I was younger.
We must be so intelligent that he does not suspect us of being intelligent at all.
Absolutely.
And there you will be invaluable, mon ami. Come.
Other than that, I don't know, I didn't love this one as much as some of her others, but that's not to say that you won't. I think it's still incredibly clever, and yeah, it's just not one of my personal favourites. Next one is one of my all-time favourites, and it is Peril at End House. I gave this 5 stars, absolutely loved it. Hercule Poirot is vacationing on the Cornish coast when he meets Nick Buckley. Nick is the young and reckless mistress of End House, an imposing structure perched on the rocky cliffs of St. Lou. Poirot quickly takes a particular interest in the young woman. Recently, she has narrowly escaped a series of life-threatening accidents. Something tells the Belgian sleuth that these so-called accidents are more than just mere coincidences or a spat of bad luck. Something like a bullet. It seems all too clear to him that someone is trying to do away with poor Nick. But who? And what is the motive? So in this one, once again, Poirot is on holiday. Poor chap, he like never ever gets a break. What I really loved about this one is that it has a number of red herrings, but also it's got one of my like all-time favorite tropes in it. I can't divulge what trope that is without spoiling the ending, but it was so much fun, and I also really love the added moments of friendship between Poirot and Hastings, who, bless him, is comically clueless the whole way through and is constantly being chastised by Poirot for his like idiocy.
Oh.
I think maybe I'd recommend starting with this one. If you're going to read Agatha Christie, I feel like maybe this is a good one to start with. After that, we have The Mystery of the Blue Train. A mysterious woman, a legendary cursed jewel, and a night train from London to the French Riviera. Ingredients for the perfect romance or the perfect crime. When the train stops, the jewel is missing, and the woman is found dead in her compartment. It's the perfect mystery, filled with passion, greed, deceit, and confusion. 2 stars for that one. I found it really, really boring. David Suchet though is wonderful. But yeah, I found that one just really boring. Sorry. I would highly recommend watching the episode though. The episode was really, really fun. Dead Man's Folly. This is one of the most recent ones that I've read. Hercule Poirot must unmask a devious killer when a mock murder mystery proves all too fatal in this Agatha Christie classic. Sir George and Lady Stubbs, the hosts of a village fete, hit upon the novel idea of staging a mock murder mystery. In good faith, Ariadne Oliver, Queen, the well-known crime writer, agrees to organise their murder hunt. Despite weeks of meticulous planning, at the last minute, Ariadne calls her friend Hercule Poirot for his expert assistance. Instinctively, she senses that something sinister is about to happen. I feel like by itself it was a very good book. There are lots of red herrings, lots of twists, lots of clues so that the reader can kind of try and piece the mystery together themselves. The reveal was satisfying and the explanation was like incredibly clever. However, I think that on the whole, I think it was kind of an unremarkable book for Christie, and there were some elements that I found extremely repetitive. Everyone thinks that the murderer must be some psychopath, which actually is kind of a recurring thing in her books. When the suspects are being interviewed, they're always like, some psychopath is on the loose, oh. And there seemed to be kind of like a personal agenda with this one. I feel like Agatha Christie was really using Ariadne's voice to answer some criticism that she had received and kind of complain about some things that she might have experienced as an author and like things that people say to her because she's an author. I think she was also kind of trying to answer some of the criticisms that maybe she was a little ethnocentric. Is that the correct term? Ethnocentric? That she was racist. The episode is chef's kiss. I highly recommend that you go watch that one. Oh, and also David Suchet narrates the book and it's fantastic. We stan David Suchet. He's a national treasure and must be protected at all costs. The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. This is the book that hooked me. I read this one beginning of July? End of July? Beginning of August? Anyway, I can't remember, but this is the one that I read and I was like, oh my god, these are so good. After reading, I'd read the 2 books that I'd read before this were And Then There Were None and Halloween Party, and I wasn't convinced. I wasn't having that good a time. I was not on the Agatha Christie train yet. It's incredibly popular and it is revered as one of, I think it's like on the list of 1001 books that you must read before you die. Now that I've read it, I completely understand the praise and would have to agree. The peaceful English village of King's Abbot is stunned. The window Ferris. Oh no, not the window. I was gonna say it again. The widow Ferris dies from an overdose of veronal. I've typed this out and yet I'm still surprised by some of the words that I myself have typed out. The widow Ferris dies from an overdose of veronal. Not 24 hours later, Roger Ackroyd, the man she had planned to marry, is murdered! Oh no! It is a baffling case involving blackmail and death that taxes Hercule Poirot's little grey cells before he reaches one of the most startling conclusions of his career. The ending, which obviously I will not discuss in explicit detail, is what makes this a 5-star review. I can 100% guarantee that you will not guess who the murderer is by the end of this book. I mean, you will by the end because it's going to tell you. But before the end of this book, you will not guess who the murderer is. I can like 100% guarantee. What makes this so good is it's only by like rereading certain passages that you then see that the clues were there the whole time. They were right in front of you. And that is like such a testament to Agatha Christie's writing, that she was able to even do that. The skill that she has as a writer is just astonishing, and it's why she's so amazing, and it is why she's the queen of crime. If you're gonna read an Agatha Christie book, I said that you should start with Peril at End's House, but I retract that statement. The one that is gonna make you want to read all of her books is this one. It's so good. So I highly recommend. Do yourself a favor, if you're gonna try and get into reading her books, read this one. If you're gonna only read one of her books ever, which would be like a true disaster, this is the one that you should read, because there's a reason that it is praised as much as it is. Death on the Nile, and I actually have my beautiful copy of the book. Oh, it's focusing on my face. Is it not so pretty? And also, there's like the boat at the beginning of the chapters and stuff. Death on the Nile, the tranquility of a lovely cruise along the Nile is shattered by the discovery that Lynette Ridgway has been shot. She was young, stylish and beautiful, a girl who had everything until she lost her life. Who was also on board? Well, of course, Christie's great detective Hercule Poirot is on holiday. He recalls an earlier outburst by a fellow passenger. I'd like to put my dear little pistol against her head and just pull the trigger. Despite the exotic setting, nothing is ever quite what it seems. What does that mean? Despite the exotic setting, nothing is ever quite... What has that got to do with the exotic setting? Goodreads? Explain? Obviously, one of her most infamous works. I was very excited to get to it, even though I knew this one off by heart, because once again, this was one of my favorite episodes. I know it really well now, and despite that I was still really excited to actually read the book that it was adapted from. I was not disappointed. Yes, it is like, it does take away from the enjoyment if you already know the story, but I still think that it's worth reading, especially again if you are already someone who really likes Agatha Christie. I would still recommend picking it up, and it was so good. And it was, you don't know if like there are bits that have been changed or adapted, or you know, like have been like lost in translation, so it's nice to come back to the source material. Super clever, super atmospheric. If you haven't read this one, if you don't know anything about it yet though, I doubt it though, because it is like so famous, but if you don't know anything about it, you'll love it. Read it. And then I also just wanted to add a little footnote, if I may. Kenneth Branagh needs to be jailed for his crimes against Agatha Christie's name. He needs to be publicly shamed. He is Delulu. Those were all of the Poirot books that I've read so far. I feel like there aren't that many, but you know, there must be. I don't know. Anyway, we're now going to move on to the next category, which I have named Not Poirot. Fun standalones all the same. Bye bye Poirot. Thank you so much for your contribution. David Suchet, we love you. He's not dead, but you know, like this chapter of this video is now dead. First one that I'm going to talk about is, again, one of her most famous ones ever, and it was the first book that I ever read by her. I've already mentioned it earlier, but it is And Then There Were None. First there were 10, a curious assortment of strangers summoned as weekend guests to a little private island off the coast of Devon. Their host, an eccentric millionaire, unknown to all of them, is nowhere to be found. All that the guests have in common is a wicked past they're unwilling to reveal, and a secret that will seal their fate. For each has been marked for murder. A famous nursery rhyme is framed and hung in every room of the mansion. When they realise that murders are occurring as described in the rhyme, terror mounts. One by one they fall prey. Before the weekend is out, there will be none. Who has choreographed this dastardly scheme? And who will be left to tell the tale? Only the dead are above suspicion. It sounds so good. I mean, it's a famous one for a reason, and there have been loads of adaptations of this, and like, I was gonna say remixes, but that's not quite right, but you know what I mean. I really want to read this one again in particular because I think, despite this being like some of her most famous work, I like remember having a good time with this one. But that's all I remember. And I think the problem was maybe that because it was the first book that I ever read by her and I wasn't yet a fan, so I wasn't really paying as close attention, I guess. I don't know. And also I went through it as an audiobook, so I think there were just things that got like went over my head. And so because of that, I genuinely, I couldn't tell you who the murderer is in this one, and I've read it. It could be a blessing in disguise. It means that I can reread this one with fresh eyes as if I've never read it before, and I look forward to doing that. Crooked House. In the sprawling, half-timbered mansion in the affluent suburb of Swinley Dean, Aristide Leonidas lies dead from barbiturate poisoning. An accident? Not likely. In fact, suspicion has already fallen on his luscious widow, a cunning beauty 50 years his junior, set to inherit a sizable fortune and rumoured to be carrying on with a strapping young tutor comfortably ensconced in the family estate. That was a very long sentence. Criminologist Charles Hayward is casting his own doubts on the innocence of the entire Leonidas brood. He knows them intimately. He really does. He's like sleeping with one of them.
I say. Oh, sorry.
Or he would like to be, he's not yet. And he's certain that in a crooked house such as Three Gables, no one's on the level. This one had a really interesting characterization of a cast of really eccentric characters and a very well-crafted plot. It gradually builds tension with a really unexpected but satisfying ending, throwing suspicion on one character and then eliminating them and moving on to the next one. With Agatha Christie's book, she was taking no prisoners. Literally, when she said that anyone in the right circumstance could be the murderer, she really did mean anyone. I feel like in other kind of cozy murder books, there's always a few characters that no matter what, you just know are going to be exempt. You might have that character that's a bit like Watson-esque. You know he's not going to be the murderer. I don't have any other examples, but you know that there are like going to be some characters that it's very unlikely that they're going to be the murderer. Not with Agatha Christie. She really said anyone. It could even be Poirot. Yeah, I knew I was gonna love this one, and when I read the author's forenote, I don't have it with me right now, but she explains how much she loved this book. She said that she had like the plot in her head for years and years, and she was kind of just waiting to write it, waiting for the right moment, and she felt like she was really intimate with these characters and she really knew the Leonidas family, and it was almost as if they were real to her and she was just writing these real people's story. And yeah, just knowing that this was one of her favorites and that she really cared for it told me that I knew I was gonna love it. And she also explained how when she started writing this book, she kind of had the plot in her mind and she had all of the characters mainly, but when she started writing the book, she actually didn't know who the murderer was going to be yet. The Unexpected Guest, which is one of my favourite Agatha Christie's. I love this one. I wanted to mention that this one, Charles Osborne adapted the novel because it was originally a play of the same title from 1958. So if you do listen to the audiobook, just know that it is an adaptation, but I feel like you don't really have to worry about it so much because it's quite dialogue heavy, so there's not much of Osborne in the writing, if that makes sense. When a stranger runs his car into a ditch in dense fog near the South Wales coast and makes his way to an isolated house, he discovers a woman standing over the dead body of her wheelchair-bound husband, gun in her hand. She admits to murder, and the unexpected guest offers to help her concoct a cover story. But is it possible that Laura Warwick did not commit the murder after all? If so, who is she shielding? Who is she shielding? Shielding. The victim's retarded young half-brother. Can we say that? Can we say that? Not my words, Goodreads words. The victim's retarded young half-brother or his dying mate. Oh right, okay, it's a question. God. The victims. You know what? We're gonna remove retarded. I don't know why retarded has to be in there. Goodreads, shame on you. Why are we labeling this young man? The victim's young half-brother or his dying matriarchal mother? Laura's lover? Perhaps the father of the little boy killed in an accident for which Warwick was responsible. The house seems full of possible suspects. This was fast-paced, it was gripping, the mystery was so good, and literally like everyone is hiding something, everyone is lying. Once again, anybody could be the murderer, and it really keeps you guessing until the end. I personally did not see the ending coming. Again, just so good. I don't know what it is about this one that I enjoyed so much. Moving on to Endless Night, not so much a fun one for me. Gypsy's Acre was a truly beautiful upland site with views out to sea, and in Michael Rogers it stirred a childlike fantasy. There, amongst the dark fir trees, he planned to build a house, find a girl, and live happily ever after. Yet as he left the village, a shadow of menace hung over the land. For this was the place where accidents happened. Perhaps Michael should have heeded the locals' warnings. There's no luck from them as meddles with Gypsy's Acre. I'm supposed to say that with an accent, but there's no way I can do it. Michael Rogers is a man who is about to learn the true meaning of the old saying, "In my end is my beginning." This one had gothic overtones, it had like cursed land, it had like a unlucky property, lots of superstitions and like little strange old ladies muttering about, you know, warnings and dark premonitions. So it's definitely a dark and sinister one. It felt a little bit darker than some of the others. I felt that there wasn't... Agatha Christie does perfectly insert some moments of humor, and she very much makes fun of her own characters, and so there is that kind of levity within her books, and I found that wasn't really the case in this one. It just felt dark and sinister pretty much the whole way through. I think it was another very clever story, but it really got bogged down in the middle. It was kind of a little bit dull and slow for the second half before picking up pace at the end and then leading to a very unexpected climax, and it was intense. Yeah, it would have taken me a lot longer to finish it if I hadn't had this like full day of weeding. I was out in the garden and I was just weeding for hours and hours, so I think it would have taken me so much longer to finish if that hadn't been the case. I think the ending was good. I wasn't there for the journey. I did not love that journey for me. If you have lots of cleaning, maybe a good option. I feel like the ending does kind of make up for it and it is worth it, but it is slow. Now that I am thinking back to it, the ending was good. Also, fun fact, I've written down fun facts that you can bring up at your next trivia night. You can mention this to break the ice. The title Endless Night was taken from William Blake's Auguries of Innocence and describes Christie's favourite theme in the novel, a twisted character who always chooses evil over good. Christie finished Endless Night in 6 weeks as opposed to the 3 to 4 months that most of her other novels took, which is pretty impressive because it's still like a very good book. It's just that it wasn't my personal favourite. After that is Sparkling Cyanide, and I can tell you this one is going to take a little bit more time because I have things to say about this one. I did not like it. 6 people sit down to a sumptuous meal at a table laid for 7. In front of the empty place is a sprig of rosemary. Rosemary for remembrance. Remembrance. A strange sentiment considering no one is likely to forget the night, exactly a year ago, that Rosemary Barton died at exactly the same table. Her beautiful face unrecognisable, convulsed with pain and horror. But then, Rosemary had always been memorable. She had the ability to arouse strong passions in most people she met. In one case, strong enough to kill. I was incredibly disappointed with this one. I was really excited to read it. I think the construction of the book is interesting. The first half is the bit that I enjoyed the most, when you kind of get each character's POV, like each character gets their own chapter and you kind of see all of the different reasons they had to wish Rosemary dead. But then I think that the different POVs got a little confused. Sometimes you would have some of the same POV, like some different POVs within the same chapter, and they were kind of just they flowed into one another and it wasn't very clear when a switch was happening. Yeah, it felt a little bit confused. The characters were not distinct or memorable, maybe because of this reason. Colonel Race is like a splotch of white paint on a white wall. Thought that he was just a normal character, like a normal suspect amongst all of these other characters, until I realized that actually Colonel Race is one of Agatha Christie's recurring detectives, and I did not know. I just thought he was a random character. Melted right in there. I thought that the plot for this one was really meh. It didn't have me gripped like some of her other work, and the ending, which very unusual for her, really let me down. I really did not like the ending and I don't understand it, and I am now going to go into explaining why I didn't like the ending. So for this next portion there will be spoilers. I will put a timestamp on the screen that you can skip to if you don't want to hear any of the spoilers, so please just go to this. Okay, so you've been warned. I'm going to go into spoiler territory now, so last warning, if you don't want spoilers. The victim of the second murder was not the intended victim. George was murdered because of a simple mistake. So a waiter picks up this bag that has fallen, places it on the table, but incorrectly places it at the wrong seat. Are you following me? So then the intended victim, Iris, returns to the table but was naturally drawn to where her bag was. So she returns to where the waiter has placed her bag, which is not her original seat. It was mistakenly placed one seat to the right, I believe, which means that the unintended victim drinks the poison out of her glass, George being the unintended victim. Do you follow me? This is a very, very, very weak twist with a lot of plot holes. Firstly, how did no one notice? You're telling me that not a single person, even after the fact, noticed this switch. And not only that, Agatha Christie explains in the reveal, right, in the big reveal, she explains that because of Iris, the intended victim, sitting at the wrong seat, all of the characters then followed suit and all sat at the wrong seat. So all of the characters moved one seat to the right, I hope this is clear. Which means that not a single person, when returning to the table after dancing, noticed that they were sitting in the wrong seat. None of them noticed that their cutlery wasn't how they left it, that their glasses weren't how they'd left it, that their view of the room had changed. None of them noticed this at the time or after the fact. Which seems especially ridiculous because George, the host, took so much care into recreating the night when his wife died. And not only that, but during the reveal you're also told that there was an MI15 agent who was supposedly watching this table really, really closely. He didn't notice that. There was also this busybody blonde lady who was on the next table and who was like bored of her conversation, so she was watching the table. She didn't notice it. The waiter didn't notice this. The same thing is repeated later as a kind of test to prove this theory. So there are 3 different characters who had all been sitting at this table and they're discussing something. They get up to leave the room, and one character who wants to prove his theory discreetly moves a different character's pipe from where he'd left it on the table. He moves it to the other side of the table. And so when the 3 men return to this small coffee table, the man who owns the pipe is drawn to where the pipe is and goes to where the pipe is and sits in front of his pipe and doesn't notice that it's been moved. I don't understand that, because I know that I personally would have found that really confusing, but I would walk back into the room and be like, who moved my pipe? That's not where I left the pipe. Why is my pipe suddenly over there? Like, I would notice that, and I feel like anybody else would notice that. Even if I walked back to my pipe, I feel like the other people wouldn't. They would know. And I just think it's such a weak explanation that doesn't make sense. And then there were other things that I didn't understand. I personally didn't really understand Ruth's motive. So she helped Victor murder Rosemary, which firstly, I don't understand why Victor wanted to murder Rosemary. It's explained that it's because he wants her money, but her money automatically went to Iris, which she knows. Had he already planned on killing Iris? I didn't get that bit. Ruth wanted Rosemary gone because she wanted George, but the book explains that she had fallen in love with Victor. So then her original motive of wanting Rosemary out of the way because she was in love with George doesn't make sense anymore, because then her motivation for helping Victor was because she'd fallen in love with Victor, which also seems very weird. I don't understand how that happened because they met once. So those were like other qualms that I had with it. It felt again weak, and it was confusing to me, and I didn't really understand that whole explanation of the plot. And then to top it off, I don't understand what was the deal with the Faradays. I don't understand their whole thing. I was massively disappointed, and it's the only time that I've been like genuinely really annoyed with her explanation of a mystery. Yeah, I didn't like that one. But we're ending off on a good note because this was another one of my all-time favourites. I really, really loved this one, and that is Why Didn't They Ask Evans? Bobby Jones discovers the crumpled body of a dying man whose last words are, "Why didn't they ask Evans?" Haunted by these words, Bobby sets out to solve a mystery that brings him into mortal danger. Amelia Fox did an absolute incredible job of narrating the audiobook for this one. She really captured the characters and understood the humour and brought it to life. This has got to be one of Christie's strongest books, in my opinion. The characters are great. Bobby is an extremely likeable, if not very intellectual man, and Frankie is an extremely witty and fearless woman who insists on continuing to investigate even if it leads to peril. They make the most fantastic duo. Together they become like these amateur sleuths and investigate this gruesome mystery. They're like interactions and observations made me laugh out loud numerous times. I had so much fun with this one. It was super twisty. I was unsure who the guilty party was right up until the end. It was a great standalone, so if you feel a little bit overwhelmed by the Poirot series or the Marple series, then maybe this is a really good place for you to start, especially seeing as the humour just makes it so fun. The writing is masterful. It was a little bit slow in the beginning. Even little details that somehow seem irrelevant at the time have like an overall importance. But it's mostly the fact that she's able to keep you guessing until the very end. And I have, as someone who has read a lot of thrillers and a lot of murder mysteries, and usually find it hard to find good thrillers and good murder mysteries because I'm usually always able to kind of predict who is going to be the murderer, or I always kind of figure out the twists. Agatha Christie, she still manages to get me every single time, and that is why I love her. I think she was an incredible woman. Her twists are amazing. Her mind was out of this world, and she will forever remain one of my all-time favorite authors. And so that is a wrap on this video. Thank you very much if you stuck around right until the end. I hope you enjoyed it. This is probably going to be my like part one of doing all of the Agatha Christie books that I have read. Yeah, I had so much fun doing this one. It took me quite a while to prepare and do all of my notes. If you did like it, I would really appreciate hearing that down in the comments, or like leaving a like or whatever. But I just really appreciate it because a lot of work did actually go into this, a lot more than you would actually think. I now need to move this sofa back to where I got it from because my mother will not be happy. I hope you are now excited to try some of her books. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you very, very soon with some more autumny spooky content, and until then, take care. Bye!
How does one live with the fact that, au fond, nature is untidy, uncontrolled, anarchic, inefficient?
But that's what I like about it.